Hi, welcome back to the Scribe Studio. I'm Mark Walker, and I'm here with Nate Keefe.
Hey Mark, how's it going?
I'm good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Today we're going to be talking with Nate about batch processing with Scribe Online and how that can improve performance for data integration and data migration designs.
Yep.
So why don't we start off, Nate, with a little bit of a definition about batch processing and what that is, and then talk about who could take advantage of it in what situations.
So batch processing in Scribe Online, it's a way to kind of group together a bunch of source rows, prepare the field mappings, and send them all off to the target all at once. And so that's going to greatly increase performance for the records processed per second. And so there's different connectors out there that are going to support batch processing.
Right.
So basically we're looking for that API to have some kind of a way to accept records asynchronously or through an array.
Okay.
So we could say, here's 100 leads that I want to import. Let's just do it all at once.
So it's something that whatever target endpoint we're connecting to, it has to be supported in their interface method, whether it's an API or web service or what have you.
Right. Okay. So here I have a graph that shows basically I'm doing the same exact mappings.
Okay.
Between CRM and Salesforce Online.
Okay.
And you can see I'm just turning on the batch processing. Doing multiple records at a time, I'm going to really increase performance.
Right, especially helpful, I would imagine, in situations where the endpoint you're connecting to is a cloud-based system. So if it has batch capability and you can send a group of records to it in one shot, since you're doing that over the internet, it probably helps a lot with the performance.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
It's going to work a lot better, in a scheduled scenario or a batch, if you will, than it would, in an event.
Right. If you're just doing event-based transactional type things, you don't have the need really to group that many records to send at once.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
So, batch processing is actually going to be configured per operation.
Okay. So it's not something you configure in the connector or the connector setup dialog.
Right.
Okay.
So when I go and I'm going to do, an upsert to Salesforce, or, a create for something else, there's actually going to be a checkbox that says this is going to be a batch operation.
Okay.
So I'll check the checkbox, and then I get to say, what's the size of my batch? Meaning, how many records is Scribe going to hold until it's going to send them all off into Salesforce or CRM?
Now, there are limits to what you can set that batch size to?
So in Scribe Online, we're going to let you type in, up to 10,000 records.
Okay.
Each one of these APIs is going to have a different limit. It's going to have a different sweet spot. So even if you were to go over that, if I know that Salesforce is going to accept 2,000 records at a time, and I type in 4,000, Scribe's going to go and figure it out, and it's going to give me 2,000 at a time.
So how do you know what number to put in there?
So you could check out the help, and so the Salesforce, the SOAP API is 200.
Right.
The bulk API is 10,000.
Okay.
CRM doesn't have a limit. You just kind of find that sweet spot.
Okay.
So kind of wanted to walk you through, what goes through in that Scribe mapping when we're going to do a batch operation.
So there's a bit of a flow chart for what's going on behind the scenes when we're processing stuff in batch.
Yep. So we're going to start this map. It's going to perform a query. Let's say we get 100 records that we want to process. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go through those mappings, whatever the if-else statements, the concatenate formulas, and even the lookups, which we'll get to later. We're going to get all those ready. Okay. And we're going to look at the operation. We're going to say, is this a batch upsert? And so when it is, we're going to look and say, all right, here's one record. Have we reached our limit? Have we reached 200, or have we run out of source rows? Okay. So the agent's actually going to cache all those source rows until we reach the limit, and then it's going to go ahead and execute that operation.
So it does whatever lookups and formulas for reformatting the data that's coming from your source, and then stores that in a batch or a bin. We call it a bin for now, in memory. And when it reaches whatever the batch size limit is that you configured for that operation, let's say it was 100, when you hit the 100th row, then it sends all those off and does the create or the upsert or whatever the operation was.
Exactly. Okay. So then we'll go through the rest of the map. We'll go do is there more source records? Okay. Stuff that you would expect. Right. But what I wanted to highlight is, about lookups. So if I'm going out to, a cloud API, that can be kind of costly to me, because now I'm not just going through the agent's code all locally, which takes, milliseconds.
Right. Because you're hitting the cloud API every source row. As you're loading up your batch, you're looking for something in the cloud.
Right, and they're going to throttle me a little bit too. So let me walk you through kind of an
Meaning
example.
slow you down, not beat you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I have a map here. I have, let's say I have some text leads, and I need these to go into my CRM system.
Okay.
So whether it's, an update insert, which looks up a value and then decides am I going to update or create, or I just have a setup like this where I'm going to do a lookup and then use the lookup values to do the update.
Okay.
I'm going to go through, kind of this chronologically. So I'll perform the query.
Yep.
The next thing, the first operation I'm doing is the lookup.
Okay.
So what that's going to do is it's going to go out to that cloud app and it's going to request, here's my email address, does this lead exist? So then that, Salesforce or CRM, whatever it is, it's going to come back to me and say, all right, this exists, here's the field you requested, or it doesn't exist. So now Scribe's going to have that data to put into the field mappings. So now the next thing for this update step is going to be, whatever my functions or formulas were.
Right.
And it's going to say, okay, I'm ready to go with this. This is a batch operation. Do we have those 200? Or have we run out of source routes, right?
Okay.
So I could be sitting here going through 1 through 7 until I reach my batch limit.
All right.
Now once I get to that limit or I run out of source rows, I'm going to go and commit those to the target.
Okay.
So this kind of, when you look at steps, 3 through 5, I'm spending a lot of time going back and forth there. So that's actually what's going to hurt my batch operations the most.
So those lookups you were talking about before and showing this example are what are going to slow batch down.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's not going to break the batch. It's still going to work all through that process, but all those field mappings, if-else statements, CSV lookup, all that stuff that's local to that agent is going to perform much quicker.
Right. So if you can do your lookups locally somehow instead of doing them out in the cloud, that would be a good thing to do.
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's kind of take you into Scribe Online. And I have a migration scenario here. I'm trying to keep this simple, so I have a Salesforce. I'm going to get some accounts. And for every account that I get, I'm going to go through and do a batch operation to update the CRM account. So if the connector is going to support batch, it's going to be in this operation configuration that actually it's a checkbox here, and I'll be able to turn it on.
So if the connector you're working with doesn't support batch, you won't even have this won't even show up on the screen.
Yep.
Okay.
So after I've turned it on, I get to choose that batch size.
Yep.
How many accounts am I going to take? I'm going to save and cache until I send them over.
Right.
So for me, the sweet spot's 200. You could be using more than that with different applications.
Okay.
And so basically, this is going to be going through all these accounts. It's going to do all my field mappings really quick. All 200 of those, send them off. Do the next 200, send them off. And if I'm going to pull out, a lookup here, and I'm going to look up that account first, we walk through that scenario, that could break this.
Okay. Or slow it down.
Yeah, or slow it down.
Yep.
If I'm also going to do, if-else statements here, let's say I can intelligently figure out that without doing a lookup, I'll just look at my source data, and I'm going to know whether it's going to be an update or create.
Okay.
Maybe there's a field I can key off of.
Right.
I'll put that criteria in my if-else statement. Now, that's all agent side, it's all local, so I can go and do one of these two batch operations, and that's going to perform much, much quicker.
So I want to get back to something about the lookup that you were talking about, because you've referenced it twice, and how doing lookups doesn't really break batch per se, but it does slow it down because you're going out across, going across the wire or the internet to look up something. So I would just want to talk for a minute about how, if you need to do a lookup, but naturally you might think, well, I'm going to do that against my target side, but the target is the thing on the internet that's going to make the lookup be slow.
Throttle you.
And you're going to get throttled. Maybe your Salesforce throttles the API that hits that you can use in a day, depending on your license. So without going into too much detail, could you just give people a tip or two about how you can transition to do the lookups locally as opposed to doing them in the target, which could be out there somewhere on the internet?
Yeah, so let's say this has been an ongoing integration that I've had, doing lookups and updating and creating records. If I could go out and create a custom field on this source side here, on the light blue,
Saying your source side is something local, like a SQL database that you have locally.
It could be the SQL database, or it could be, my Salesforce. I have a custom field there.
Right.
So let's say every time I create that record, I go and update this source record.
Okay.
So if I'm querying accounts, I'll target accounts, I'll match on the primary key of my record, and I'll take this guy here, this create, it'll be a non-batch operation, and I'll update my source with it. So now this if-else, I don't have to go and do the lookup. I just look at that source field to see if it's null or empty.
Okay. Are there anything else, any other conditions other than lookups that can slow down processing, and not just batch, but regular kind of processing?
Yeah, so kind of, outside of the flow chart that we showed you, if I'm going to get a lot of errors, that's going to slow down my agent.
Right.
It has to go and figure out what rows go with what.
Right.
Most of the, any of these control blocks here, they're going to all, kind of help you out and not break the batch.
Okay.
I can use a CSV lookup. If I pull that into memory, even though that's kind of an added step, anything local is really going to be so
a CSV lookup, if you don't know what that is a way that you can have a text file that's installed locally where your local agent is installed. Yep. And there's a function that you can use in Scribe Online in a formula to do lookups against that CSV table, which we can actually cache in the memory of the computer where the agent is running. So that's a way you can get through lookups really quickly. Probably wouldn't be appropriate for a situation where you're doing primary ID matching, but if you have some
if I want to look up,
go ahead.
System users or price lists, something that doesn't change a whole lot.
Right.
Put it in a CSV file in another
and do the lookup locally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else that you wanted to get through in this video, or are you ready to move to the summary?
Yeah, no, let's move to the summary.
Okay.
So, with batch processing, I always like to keep it simple.
Right.
Have all my operations either support batch or take them out.
Right.
Do my lookups locally, get them in the source data, get them into a CSV file.
Okay.
And then I guess the only kind of downside, we talked about all the pros of this.
Right.
The only downside is that if I'm going to do this update here to the account, I can't use the results of that operation in future operations.
Okay.
So think about...
Right, because hasn't been committed yet.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it possibly couldn't have been committed in the diagram.
So a little more detail for you on that is Scribe Online has this concept that we refer to as backfill. So if you do an operation, let's say if you point to that update step, that update is performed against the target, and we can retrieve any value of the record that we just updated and use that in a step that comes later on. There's a way through the formula editor that you can access the results of any previous step. But if you're working in batch mode, that step hasn't actually happened yet because it's just building up in the batch, so you don't have access to it. So batch, in a way, kind of breaks some of the backfill stuff that you might rely on with a non-batch type of job. So just one caveat to remember. That's about it. All right. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us in the studio, and we hope you come back the next time and check out some more of our videos.